Welcome back to the 5th edition of NFL Weekly. I'm Nick Sinafani.
I'm Brenden Garula.
And we're not going to waste any time. Let's get right into it, Brenden.
The first game we have here today is the Browns and 49ers. This was a rough one for the Cleveland fans out here. Baker Mayfield only throwing for 100 yards and 2 interceptions while also fumbling the ball. Nick Chubb still had a pretty good game, 16 attempts for 87 yards, but no touchdown to count for. But the 49ers defense is where it really happened. That's why they won this game. Even though the 49ers put up 31 points, with Jimmy Garoppolo throwing for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Matt Breida rushing for 114 yards and a touchdown, the 49ers defense is where they really won this game. The 49ers won 31-3.
Minshew Mania arrives in Carolina, where the Jags are taking on the Panthers. Gardner himself, pretty fantastic game if you ask me, throwing for 374 and 2 touchdowns, both of those going to the fantastic DJ Chark, who had 164 yards and 2 touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey is just steadily amazing every week, 176 on the ground while accounting for 2 touchdowns, as well as 61 yards and a touchdown on the receiving end. This Kyle Allen-led team has yet to lose as the Panthers beat the Jags by 7, 34-27.
The next game, we head to Heinz Field as the AFC North rivalry between the Ravens and Steelers comes to Pittsburgh. Lamar Jackson has a very rough game throwing, 161 yards and a touchdown, also 3 interceptions. But he had a pretty decent game on the ground today, 14 attempts and 70 yards. But the Steelers' offense looked pretty good. Mason Rudolph throwing for 130 yards and a touchdown, but he got hurt, so we had to go to the other backup. James Conner had 14 attempts for 55 yards and a touchdown. But the Ravens still take this ugly one, 26-23 in overtime.
We head to Tennessee in a very low-scoring matchup between the Bills and the Titans, one that was to be expected with 2 young quarterbacks who still haven't hit their peak. Josh Allen throwing for 219 yards and 2 touchdowns while also throwing a pick, putting up a good stat line for himself. While Derrick Henry has a good game on the ground, rushing for 78 and a touchdown. The Bills take one with not too much to talk about, 14-7.
Next we head to D.C. as the Redskins, who are still winless, host the Patriots that are undefeated. Tom Brady has a very good game as expected, 348 yards and 3 touchdowns, but also throwing a pick. Sonny Michel had a pretty good game on the ground, 91 yards and a touchdown, as well as Julian Edelman hauling in 8 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown. The Patriots remain undefeated, going to 5-0, beating the Redskins 33-7.
Now we head out to London, where the Raiders are taking on the Bears in Khalil Mack's first game facing his old team. The Bears could not get anything going on the ground, with their leading rusher, David Montgomery, putting up 11 attempts for 25 yards. But on the other hand, Josh Jacobs had a fantastic game, rushing for 123 and 2 touchdowns. Other than that, not too much to say, other than Allen Robinson had another good game, hauling in 7 for 97 and 2 touchdowns. And Chase Daniel did almost enough to lead the Bears past the Raiders, but they took a 3-point L, 24-21.
Next we head to Philadelphia as the Eagles host the Jets. Carson Wentz didn't have the best game of his career, only throwing for 89 yards and a touchdown. Zach Ertz finally got something rolling with 5 receptions, 57 yards, and a touchdown. On the Jets side, Luke Falk still not performing very well, 120 yards and 2 interceptions. And Le'Veon Bell still can't get any room to run, only 15 attempts for 43 yards. The Eagles take this one 31-6.
We head to MetLife, where the Giants are taking on the Vikings, and Kirk Cousins is finally hitting his stride, throwing 22 of 27 for 306 yards and 2 touchdowns, with both of those going to Adam Thielen, who put up 7 receptions for 130 yards. Dalvin Cook, another fantastic game, rushing for 132 and 86 through the air. On the Giants side of things, there's not too much to say. with a banged-up offense. Daniel Jones throwing 21 of 38 for 182 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. The Vikings take this one 28-10.
Next, we had to head to Houston as a very high-scoring game between the Falcons and Texans. Deshaun Watson throws for 426 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's an insane game right there. But Will Fuller had an even better game. 14 receptions, 217 yards, and 3 touchdowns. On the Falcons side of things, Matt Ryan threw for 330 yards and 3 touchdowns while also managing throwing a pick. The Texans take this one 53-32.
We head to Paul Brown Stadium, where Kyler Murray and the Cardinals are taking on Andy Dalton and the Bengals. This Bengals defense could do nothing to stop this Cardinals rushing attack, with Kyler Murray putting up 93 yards and a touchdown on the ground, David Johnson putting up 91, and Chase Edmonds putting up 68 and a touchdown. Kyler Murray with a decent game through the air too, completing 20 of 32 for 253 yards. On the Bengals side, Tyler Boyd had a very nice game, hauling in 10 receptions for 123 yards and a touchdown. And Joe Mixon finally had a decent game. Maybe that can get him kick-started for the rest of the year. But the Cardinals kick a field goal for the win and take this one 26-23.
Next, we head to New Orleans as the Saints host the Buccaneers. Teddy Bridgewater has another very good game. 314 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Michael Thomas also a very big game. 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the Buccaneers side of things, Chris Godwin is literally insane. 125 yards and two touchdowns. The Saints win 31-24 at home, and Teddy Bridgewater stays undefeated as a starter.
We head to L.A., where the Chargers are taking on the Broncos. Phillip Rivers with a very odd stat line, completing 32 of his 48 pass attempts, but only throwing for 211 yards and also throwing 2 picks. And this Chargers rushing offense, even getting Melvin Gordon back, got worse, with Gordon rushing 12 times for 31 yards and Austin Eckler only rushing 3 times for 7 yards, even though Eckler had his usual fantastic game on the receiving end, hauling in 15 receptions for 86 yards. For the Broncos, Phillip Lindsay had a really nice game, rushing for 114 and a touchdown, and Cortland Sutton stayed hot with 92 yards and a touchdown. And this led to the Broncos to their first one of the year, 20-13.
Next we go to Dallas as the Cowboys host the Packers. Dak Prescott had a pretty good game, 463 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he also threw 3 interceptions. Zeke really couldn't get started, only rushing for 62 yards and a touchdown. Amari Cooper broke out once again, 11 receptions, 226 yards and a touchdown. On the Packers side of things, Aaron Rodgers throws for 238 yards, but no touchdowns and no picks. Aaron Jones, a huge game on the ground. 19 attempts, 107 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He also hauled in 7 receptions for 75 yards in the air. The Packers take this one thanks to Aaron Jones, 34-24.
We head to Sunday Night Football, where the Colts are visiting the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, a good game, 22 of 39 for 321 yards and a touchdown. But he also injured his ankle, and that could affect his status for this week. Also, Byron Pringle receives 6 passes for 103 yards and a touchdown. I don't know where this dude came from, but that's all I got to say about him. Marlon Mack was a workhorse for the Colts, rushing 29 times for 132 yards. Jacoby Brissett, not the greatest game. And nothing crazy on the receiving end for the Colts. But their defense got it done, holding this Chiefs offense to 13 points and taking a 19-13 win.
Our last game was a good one, heading to Seattle as the Seahawks take on the Rams. Russell Wilson stays hot with throwing for 268 yards and 4 touchdowns. Chris Carson also had a very good game, rushing 27 times for 118 yards. On the Rams side of things, Jared Goff had a pretty good game, throwing for 395 yards and a touchdown, also throwing a pick. And Todd Gurley, not much yards to count for, but he also had 2 touchdowns. The Seahawks take this one on the Rams' missed field goal, 30-29.
Now let's get into our Team of the Week segment, which we had to give to the San Francisco 49ers for a 28-point blowout win over the Cleveland Browns, who are coming off a big win on the road against the Ravens last week. They held Baker Mayfield for 8 of 22 completions for 100 yards while also forcing 2 picks and holding Nick Chubb to 87 yards, which it still might sound pretty bad, but holding Nick Chubb is pretty hard. Nope, nothing really got going on the receiving end either for the Browns. And George Kittle finally had a breakout game, receiving 6 for 70 yards and a touchdown. And that rushing offense for the Niners had a very good game. All of this led to a tone-setting win for the rest of the season and kept them undefeated at 4-0.
Next, we head to the Player of the Week segment, as we had to give it to Will Fuller, as he hauled in 14 of his 16 targets, 217 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He also had a 44-yard touchdown, which gave the Texans a lead that they kept the rest of the game. Will Fuller was an obvious one here because he caught 88% of his targets, also for 217 yards. He helped the Texans win 53-32 at home.
Thank you for joining us on the Week 5 segment of NFL Weekly. I'm Nick Senefani.
I'm Brenden Garula.
And we will be back next week to recap all of Week 6.